All right, how's everybody doing? So before I begin, let me mention our sponsor, Ratchet Clothing. By now, everybody knows Ratchet Clothing is a company out of the UK. They have clothing for men, women, and children. They have various prints and different styles. I'll put a link down below. Go check them out. So today we're going to be talking about two captains in the Lucchese family, both who didn't get along with each other, and I'll give a little background on each one. The first being Joe Cafe DeSana. And Joe Cafe started out as an associate actually with the Gambino family. He later became an associate to the Lucchese family during a trade where a guy with the Luccheses, an associate, went with the Gambinos, and the Gambinos in turn gave the Lucchese family Joe Cafe. That could happen with associates, it can't happen with made members. So eventually Joe Cafe becomes inducted into the Lucchese family. After some time he gets the captain position. Big John Castellucci, on the other hand, was always a Lucchese associate, and during a federal prison bid, he was doing time with Joe Dinapoli. Joe Dinapoli was the consigliere of the family, and as the story goes, Big John and Joe Dinapoli were in the yard. Big John noticed that Joe Dinapoli didn't look too good. John suggested that he go to the hospital. Joe, being stubborn, he didn't want to go, and John wound up convincing him to go to the infirmary. When he got to the infirmary, he winds up having a heart attack. So, by essence, Big John saved Joe Dinapoli's life. He never forgot that. Once Big John was released from prison, Joe Dinapoli called for him, and he was inducted into the Lucchese family as well. John eventually moved himself up and also gained a captain position. So you have Joe Cafe was a captain of a crew out in Long Island, and you had Big John was a captain, happened to be my captain, was actually the Brooklyn faction, but we operated out of Staten Island. So Joe Cafe and a lot of other members of the Lucchese family never respected how Big John was inducted into the family. Basically, he saved the guy's life. Although I was a member of Big John's crew, I got along very good with Joe Cafe. And Johnny Sideburns was very close to Joe Cafe. He used to tell me all the time, Joe wants you in his crew. Joe really liked me for some reason. By dealing with both captains, I was able to pick up on a little underlying animosity between the both of them. As a matter of fact, one time Big John showed me his phone, and there was a picture of Homer Simpson's boss that whenever Joe Cafe called him would pop up. That was his picture for Joe Cafe. Big John's dislike for Joe Cafe was because he felt that Joe Cafe was kissing Matty Madonna's ass. A lot of people in the family felt the same, and as a matter of fact, Joe Cafe wound up taking Matty Madonna and himself on a trip to Italy that he paid for. When they actually came back, U.S. Customs, knowing who Matty Madonna was, decided to break their chops a little bit. They held them up for hours and hours before they released them. Joe Cafe felt that by buttering up to Matty, he eventually would be able to get a higher position, but that never took place. However, in that life, as the saying goes, he who has the king's ear is king. If you had a beef with Joe Cafe, Matty would rule against you. So here you had two captains. One was close to the acting boss, meaning Joe Cafe, and the other was close to the consigliere, meaning Big John. As I mentioned, Big John was always trying to pull backdoor moves on Joe Cafe. One in particular, as we know, Joe Cafe put his nephew as Peter Pan with me, and John put a stop to that. I think I explained the story. He basically went and put Joe Cafe on the spot and asked him if the kid was with us and we could use him in any capacity. Joe Cafe didn't want that. John stopped me from taking care of the kid. So Joe Cafe didn't like that John did that. Basically, the animosity for each other came to a head. It involved an incident that I was in, and I'll explain as follows. One day while at Joe Cafe's house, he lived in Oceanside, New York, I had a discussion with him about some of the things that took place with Big John. After listening to me, Joe Cafe turned around and told me, I'm going to get you transferred to my crew. Don't tell anybody that we had this discussion. I said, okay, Joe. We shook hands, and I left. About 2-3 weeks later, I get a call from Johnny Sideburns, who was a member of our crew, and he asked me if I could meet him in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. He comes up with a time. I drive to Bay Ridge and I go to meet with Johnny Sideburns. As I'm pulling up to the location, who do I see standing next to Johnny Sideburns on a corner is Big John. I park my car, I get out of the car, Johnny Sideburns gives me a quick hello and takes off and goes in his car and he disappears. And Big John's standing there with a puss on his face. So he turns around and says to me, did you go to another captain in this family and ask to be removed from this crew? Now I had to think quick because I know What Joe Cafe told me, don't discuss this with nobody, but this could only have come from Joe Cafe himself or me. So I know I didn't say anything. So I turned around and I told John, yes, I did. I had to come up with a good excuse of why I went to Joe Cafe. So I told him the following. I said, John, I did it because I don't want to be around Anthony Guzzo no more. Prior to this, there was an incident between Anthony Guzzo and myself, and John was involved in making the decision on it. So John knew what I was talking about. After I mentioned Anthony Guzzo, I see John looked a little relieved. He turned around and he said to me, Mo, I was starting to think that you didn't like me. I said, no, that wasn't the case, John. Then he turned around and said, why didn't you come to me? Of all people, you go to that asshole Joe Cafe. So there was the animosity. So anyway, he turns around and he tells me, well, it's not happening. I'm not letting you go with him. I straightened you out. You're going to stay in this crew. I said, okay, John. When I leave Big John, I get in my car and immediately I call Johnny Sideburns because I'm so pissed off at him. I called him up. I said, John, where are you? I want to meet with you. He says, oh, I'm home. I immediately go to Howard Beach. I go to his house. He lets me in. I tell him, John, what the fuck's the matter with you? Why would you not give me a heads up that this guy's fucking wants to talk with me? He says, what was I supposed to do? He told me to call you. I said, John, I'm going to tell you what you were supposed to do. Excuse yourself at some point, go to the fucking bathroom and send me a text and let me know that I'm going to see him. He wound up giving me some bullshit apology. I left his house, got in my car, and headed straight to Joe Cafe's house. I explained everything that took place to Joe Cafe, and he turns around and says to me, I thought we discussed that you wasn't going to tell anybody that we both spoke. He said, now you made me look like a liar because I told him I never spoke to you. I said, Joe, you should have told me that you had a conversation with him and gave me a heads up in the event that he calls me, like he just did, and I'm prepared to know how to answer him. Instead, you went and spoke to him, you never told me nothing, and the guy's questioning me. I'm thinking that you might have told him for some reason. He realized the mistake he made. He says, yeah, you're right, I should have gave you the heads up. By not giving me that heads up, I wind up exposing the both of us from going behind John's back. In the end, I was stuck with Big John. Joe Cafe and Big John still had animosity going between them, even more so because of this incident. And it's probably still going on to this day because Big John was just recently released from prison and he's got to deal with Joe Cafe again. And that's really the end of that. I hope you enjoyed the story. I want to thank everyone for subscribing to the channel. If you haven't subscribed, you could do so down below. I'll put a link for my other channel, Unlimited Substance Podcast, down below. I appreciate everyone who has subscribed to that as well. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Take care of yourself. Take your vitamins. Drink your water. Ciao for now.